Hey, this is Leo for Actualized.org. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about Spiritual Enlightenment Part 2, where we're going to go deep on understanding the truth of no self. In this video, we're continuing on talking about spiritual alignment. If you did not watch my first video called Spiritual Alignment, you should definitely go and watch that, because that introduces you to a lot of the fundamental concepts, which I won't be going into here. Here we're going deeper and deeper. And where we left part 1 is that we basically were talking about the truth of no self. And we were saying that this notion that we have in society, that there is a self, a life, the self that experiences all of life, that this does not exist, that this is in fact an illusion. And that it's possible to extract yourself out from this illusion and actually then live in the truth. And that this is a very profound shift, the most profound shift that you can have as a human being. This is where the deepest, most powerful psychology work happens, is right here. And we also said in that video that you're going to be doing an empirical investigation to discover this truth for yourself. You're not just going to go and believe in it. So now what I want to do is I want to help you to actually start doing the looking. And before you can even start doing the looking, you have to start to understand some basic distinctions. So this video is going to be all about laying the groundwork and some very interesting and fascinating distinctions. This is going to go very, very deep. This is going to blow your mind, some of this stuff. So stick around. There's 3 fundamental questions that we are concerned with in doing this investigation. Question number 1 is, who am I? Question number 2 is, what is the truth? And question number 3 is, what is reality? Or another word for reality is existence. So what is reality? What is existence? These are the 3 most fundamental metaphysical kind of questions that you could possibly ask. And scientists and philosophers have been asking these questions for thousands of years, and they've been coming up with all sorts of interesting answers and having all sorts of interesting debates. But there's actually something that's very, very profound that many of them missed, which is that their theories and their debates are not the fact. And that, in fact, it's possible to answer these questions conclusively through an empirical investigation, which many people assume cannot be done. Now you might think about, well, Leo, the question, who am I know what that is. That's pretty obvious, right? Isn't it obvious? I'm this thing here. I'm this body. I'm this being. I'm this consciousness. Well, let's take a look at that question. Is it really that obvious? Have you actually sat down and looked, really looked for the answer to that question? Or do you just believe what others told you? Or do you just have your own opinions about who you think you should be? That turns out to be a very critical distinction. What you have right now is you have a lot of opinions, you have a lot of beliefs, and you have a lot of stories that other people have told you. But you have not actually sat down and looked. And the reason you haven't is because you've assumed, and all of us have assumed, that, oh, well, it's obvious. I mean, it's so obvious, why would we even need to sit down and look? Why would I waste my time on this? But interestingly, it turns out that it's not obvious at all. And this veneer of obviousness is actually hiding something very powerful and deep and profound. The most profound truth that you can find out as a human being. It's hidden under many, many layers of obviousness. Obviousness turns out to be a smokescreen. So let's start to look a little bit deeper and question some of this obviousness. So if we take your current beliefs that you are the body, this thing standing here talking or sitting on the other end of the screen, that's what conventionally we consider ourselves. So if this is me, you got to wonder, okay, so let's really think about this. So my hand, right? This is me too, right? So my hand and all this, basically everything inside the envelope of the skin is me. Okay, so that means that what happens if I take my hand and I cut off my fingers? Am I still me? And you think about it and you're like, well, I don't really identify. I mean, yeah, I can lose my fingers and people have lost their fingers. They're still themselves. Nothing really fundamental about me is going to change if I lose my fingers. Okay, so interesting. Well, what if I cut off my arms and my legs? Would I still be me? And you think about it and you're like, well, people have actually had amputations and they still seem to be themselves. So, no, I'd still be me if I lost all those. So then the fundamental me that I think that I am isn't contained within the hands or the legs. Interesting. Okay. Then you ask yourself, well, what if I got a heart transplant and somebody else's heart went into my heart? Would I still be me? And you think about it and you're like, yeah, actually, I would still probably be me. So then you start wondering, well, what would have to really change to change the fundamental me? Not the superficial me, but the fundamental me. What would have to change that? And you say, well, I'm the mind. I'm inside the head. I'm sitting here behind the eyes. My thoughts, my mind, my mental activities, that's what's really me, more so than the body. Interesting. So even right now, just through the simple investigation, we've already basically disidentified you with most of your body. Commonly, you say, oh, I'm the body. But are you really the body? We've already disidentified you with a lot of the body, only the mind. Now, when we get into the mind, we can question it even further. So the mind, what part of the mind are you? What if we cut part of your brain out? Are you still going to be yourself? Now you might wonder and say, well, I'm not quite so sure. Not so clear to say. If you cut out enough of my brain, I probably won't be myself anymore. Maybe I'll lose a part of myself. Interesting. But then even inside the brain, and really we're talking about the mind, because you don't know the brain. You only know the mind. You know kind of the softer components, what you know through your consciousness. So now from within your mind, you're looking around, and what are you inside your consciousness? Are you the thoughts that you're having? Is that what you say is you? So when you have thoughts about being hungry, when you have thoughts about going to the bathroom, when you have thoughts about your girlfriend or your boyfriend, are those thoughts literally you? You'd probably say, no, those things aren't me. I'm the one thinking those things. Interesting. So already we've said that you're not even all of your thoughts, according to your model now. You're only certain types of mental phenomenon. Maybe you're the one who's behind the thoughts, who's thinking the thoughts, who's seeing the thoughts, so to speak. Or interesting. And we can take that even further back. What in your conscious experience is actually experiencing thoughts? Who is thinking thoughts? Do thoughts think other thoughts? Or is there some sort of entity that creates thoughts? What is the entity that's creating thoughts? Are you a thought at all? Or are you something totally different from a thought? Are you some sort of entity? What are you actually? Some people say, well, I'm the soul, I'm the spirit. If you say that, then what is the soul and what is the spirit? And here you have to be very careful because you have a lot of preconceived notions and beliefs that have been fed to you by society, people telling you what a soul and a spirit is. But the question is, remember, we're doing an empirical investigation. That means we're using firsthand direct experience. We're not taking anyone's word for it. What am I if I look for myself? What am I? Can I actually see myself? Can I experience myself? Am I my self-image? So the things I think about myself, for example, if I think of myself as a great husband, if I think of myself as a great girlfriend, If I think of myself as a great parent or a child or a great student or a great business person, is that actually me? What happens if I eliminate that thought? Does that mean that some part of me is lost, or do I still remain? Now, I'm saying and asking all these questions not so that you can come up with new theories and so that you can say, oh, okay, let me start theorizing cool possibilities. No. What I'm saying is you don't really know who you are, but you believe so firmly that you do. Isn't that interesting? Isn't it interesting that you like to come up with a bunch of theories about who you think you might be, and you don't really spend a lot of time actually looking at the evidence of who you are? Instead of looking at the evidence, you'd much rather come up with a bunch of theories. We've already got a very rich history of philosophy with theories. Theories upon theories upon theories. So let's not go that direction. Instead, let's go the unorthodox direction. Let's go to the looking direction, where we want to see firsthand from the inside what the truth is. There's a second question. So this is the first question about who am I? The other question that I pose to you is, what is reality and existence? This is a very, very fascinating question. And a lot of people get really caught up on this one too, because they also have a lot of preconceived notions and theories and beliefs and religious dogma about what existence is. And scientific dogma too. But if you really think about it, you don't know what existence is. And the model that you presently have of existence makes no sense. And here's what I want to show you, is that your current model makes no sense. So let's take the most basic model, the scientific model. We say that there was a Big Bang, and then before the Big Bang, there was supposedly no space. There wasn't even a vacuum, because a vacuum is still extended in time and in space. There was no time and no space before the Big Bang. Then the Big Bang happened. This is creating the kind of matrix of reality in which we live. This created breadth and depth and width, energy and matter, and time, and this stuff expanded, and currently the universe is still expanding, and in fact, the expansion is accelerating. We're not quite sure where it's going to go. Maybe it's going to all collapse into a big crunch, or maybe it's going to keep expanding forever. We're not quite clear. The question, though, is, what is the most fundamental ultimate existence? So if we say that our current reality came from the Big Bang, what was before the Big Bang? Was it nothingness, or was it something? If it was something, what was it? If you say it was nothing, that's an interesting consideration. Most people don't like to say that it was nothing. Most people like to say you can't have something come out of nothing. And so that something had to come out of something else. So where did it come out of? Well, we might say, okay, well, it really might be that existence came out of nowhere. How do we know that something has to come out of something else? Can it be the case that something comes out of nothing? And you might say, well, that violates the laws of physics. You can't get energy from nowhere. But see, it's very interesting because we only have one example of existence. People like to make assumptions about how existence has to work. But notice that we are operating on only one point of data, which is our own single existence. We don't know any other existences. At least I don't. I only know one existence. So that means that it's very problematic to start making assumptions about how existence came about from being inside the existence and only knowing one existence. It's kind of like having a single sample point in a scientific study. If you have a single sample point, you can't make any conclusions or predictions or set any trends. How do you know that existence can't come out of nowhere? How do you know that it has to come out of somewhere? You say, well, I look around me and I see that everything comes out of something else. Well, but you're inside of existence. Our question isn't about inside the existence. Our question is about existence itself. You can think of existence kind of like a bubble. So inside the bubble, sure, we have these rules. But what are the rules outside the bubble? Are they the same rules or are they different rules? Now you might say, well, they're the same rules. How do you know they're the same rules? Have you been outside the bubble? Have you seen other bubbles? Or have you always been inside the bubble and only know what's inside the bubble? We can't say, we don't know. Now, someone might say, well, Leo, a better theory, instead of saying that existence came out of nowhere, is that it came out of somewhere. So this bubble, what if this bubble is inside another bubble, which is inside another bubble, inside another bubble? And so there's always something outside of it that is couched in. So what if our universe is kind of analogous to a molecule in a human body? The molecule thinks that it's this cool thing. And after all, a molecule is actually very big compared to, let's say, a subatomic particle. A molecule is huge. It's composed of, I don't even know how many, tons and tons of subatomic particles. But relative to the human being, the molecule is so tiny we can't even see it. You can't even see it in a microscope. It's so tiny. So what if the universe was like that? What if we're like just a little molecule, which is a component of something much, much larger, constructed out of many, many universes? Could that be the case? Well, if that's the case, then where did all that come from? So let's say that it's a bubble inside a bubble inside a bubble. Where did the biggest bubble come from? You're really not answering the question. You're just delaying it for a little bit. You see, you haven't answered the question. If you say that the universe is in a bigger bubble, then you haven't accounted for the ultimate truth of existence. Because then how did the most outer bubble come into being? Where did it come from? Did it always exist? Did it come out of nowhere? Did it come out of another bubble? Now you might say it always existed. Okay, interesting, but we don't know if that's true. You might also say it came out of nowhere, which is where we're back to, something come out of nothing. Or you could say that there's an infinite chain of bubbles and that there's just bubble on top of bubble. It just goes to infinity. That would be pretty cool and interesting and kind of counterintuitive. You might say, well, Leo, God created the universe. God created existence. Well, that doesn't solve anything because where did God come from? Now you say, well, God existed always. So then basically you're saying that God is the outermost bubble that always existed. So it doesn't really matter if you have a mystical, supernatural explanation like God, or if you say that it was just like, physics and all this kind of stuff, bubbles, which don't include any kind of deities in it. It really doesn't matter what the actual mechanics of the explanation are, because the fundamental part and problem of this whole thing is that you don't actually explain what existence is. By citing God, you explain nothing. All you're saying is that there's a bubble that always existed. Where did this bubble come from? God is like a bubble. So where did he come from? Did he always exist? Did he come out of nowhere? Or again, is he contained in something bigger? Which would just push the question back further unless you said that it was an infinity thing. So which of those is it? Or maybe it's something that we haven't even thought about here. It's fascinating. My point here is that you don't really know what existence is. I want to give you 3 distinctions now. 3 distinctions that are very important in our discussion here. And they all are basic different flavors of the same thing. So the first distinction is the one that was introduced by Immanuel Kant, who was a philosopher back in the 1700s, I believe, in Europe. And what he said is he was looking at René Descartes, he was looking at David Hume's work, and he was basically trying to synthesize 2 different strands in philosophy. One was called rationalism, the other one was called empiricism. And basically he came up with this distinction that says, okay, look, here's how reality is. We've got something called phenomenon, which are the sensations of reality, the stuff that we know directly as human beings. Colors, tastes, sounds, this kind of stuff. This is what empiricism talks about, empirical, meaning sensory. And then we have something called the noumenal world. And noumena are the things that are behind the sensations, behind the phenomenon. So I'm actually going to use an example here with an orange. Take a look at this orange. And we might say, Okay, so the phenomenon of the orange is the roundness of it and the orange color, and also the smell that it has, the zesty smell and the taste and everything else that we can perceive about it. Now, what is the noumena? The noumena is the stuff that the orange is actually made of. Because we don't actually think that the orange is made out of the color orange. It's not actually made up of the zesty smell. It's made out of something, some sort of matter or, whatever, something we can't see. So that's the phenomena-noumena distinction. And what Kant said is that we can know phenomena, but we can never know noumena. Because how would we access it? We always have the layer of perception that we have to go through. It's like a filter. So we can never get to the noumena because we have to go through phenomena. Interesting distinction. The next distinction is the matter-qualia distinction. And this is kind of like a scientific paradigm, which says that things are created of matter, or if you want, you could call it energy, matter, energy. These are like the subatomic particles that make up this orange. But then there's also the accounting of the orange phenomenally, and that we call qualia. Qualia is the stuff that we perceive about the orange. So for example, we think that the orange is made up of cells, and those cells are made up of molecules and atoms. But we don't see any of that. What we see is we see the orange color, and we have a certain smell to it, and it has a certain feel to it. These experiences, the color orange, for example, right now, the color orange is not made up of atoms. It's something else. It's a perception. So this is the matter-perception distinction. And one of the really fascinating questions in philosophy of science and philosophy of mind is, what are qualia made out of? Are qualia made out of matter or not? And if not, what the hell are they? And then we have the third distinction, which is the inner-outer world distinction. You might have heard me talking about this in other videos, in other contexts, where I talk about that conventionally we think of there's the inner world that we have of our feelings and sensations and our thoughts and our moods and our emotions. And then the outer world of hard physical matter and energy and physical laws. It's kind of like in the inner world, the physical laws don't work. The physical laws only work in the outer world. And the inner world is all filled with qualia, and the outer world is filled with matter. So all of these three are like flavors of the phenomena-noumena distinction that Kant was talking about. There turns out to be a very important distinction, and it's important to talk about these because the question ultimately becomes, who do you think you are? And the thing that you think you are, where does it exist? Does it exist in the outer world or does it exist in the inner world? And also, which world is more real? Is the outer world more dependent on the inner world? Or is the inner world more dependent on the outer world? And you might say, well, Leo, the inner world perceptions, these are all dependent on matter. Is that true, though? Is that really true? Have you really thought about that? Which world is couched in which world? It's not immediately obvious if you think about it. I want to introduce a further distinction. And this is getting into the real meat of doing spiritual alignment work, so you have to really understand this distinction well to be able to understand spiritual alignment. And this is the concept of conceptualizations. Consider three types of entities. One is the thing as it actually is, the noumena that Kant was talking about. Two is the sensations of that thing and the perceptions of it. So if we have this orange, then we've got the actual real orange. the thing that we can't even see that's responsible for all the sensations. So we've got that, whatever it is, we don't know. It's kind of like a question mark. Then, of course, we have the sensations of the orange, the phenomena of the orange. It's here. That's kind of one level higher. We have direct access to that. And then we have one level higher. What's one level higher? One level higher is concepts. Concepts is the things we think about the orange. Here, we have actually the way in which we usually interact with the orange. Even the label orange, it's an orange, it's an object. That's already a certain attitude that I take towards it. That's the human mind projecting onto the orange certain things, certain labels, certain attributes, certain opinions that I have about it, certain beliefs, certain relationships in which I am with this orange. So the difference between the perceptions and the concepts is that the perceptions are just raw perceptions without any of my biases or opinions about it. The conceptual orange is a lot of my opinions about it. So for example, I might love oranges. I might hate oranges. I might be disgusted by the sight of an orange. When I look at an orange, I might have some thoughts and memories about oranges. I might get hungry. I might start to salivate. I might want to throw it at somebody. There might be a million different attitudes that I take towards this orange. I might start dreaming of other oranges. And even, interestingly, when you take the orange away and you put it behind your back and you don't see the orange there at all, in your mind, you can still imagine the orange. So right now, you're not seeing the orange. I'm not looking at it either. It's behind my back. But we can still imagine the orange. Imagine it right now. You have a mental picture of the orange. What is that? That's a concept. You also have a vocal story in your mind that you're hearing, which says something like, I'm thinking of an orange. That is an orange. This image is of an orange. An orange is a type of fruit. So that's where we get into the really tricky aspects of being a human being, is that we think that we live here or here, but actually we live from this domain over here, which is the domain of concepts. And we overlay all these concepts on top of some sensations, and then we tell ourselves that all of this is actually the truth, the ultimate question mark, the noumena, the thing that is the noumena. And this gets us into a lot of trouble. We're talking about oranges, and that's not really pertinent to our psychology. The question, though, is, what are you within this framework? When you think about yourself, you, the person I'm pointing at right now, you, nod your head right now. Nod your head. Yeah, you're nodding your head. So that thing that you think you are, what is it on this model? It is a concept. Is it a perception? Or is it the actual noumenal thing? The thing behind it all? If you start looking very deeply, very objectively, self-honestly, what you're going to admit is that it's a concept. You is a concept. It's not even a perception. You think it's a perception, but it's actually a concept overlaid on a perception with further concepts behind it, telling it that it's not a concept. Very interesting. What are you really then, if you are not a concept and you're not a perception? What would be the real you? The noumenal you. Interesting. I've never asked that question before of myself, have I? I could come up with a bunch of theories, but how would I really know what I really am? You might say, well, Leo, that's not possible. It's not possible to know. The best we can do, as Kant said, is we can just know the phenomenal. So sure, maybe what you're saying is like there's some, deeper part of me, the real me behind the perceptions, and I can never know that. So that's just something that we can't speculate. Let's not speculate about that stuff. Let's not be speculative. Let's just stick to the stuff that we can touch, see, smell, hear, and think about. But what if it was actually possible to know the real thing? Would that be freaky or what? Would that blow your mind if that was actually a fact that you could know yourself? Well, it is. How can this be the case? I'll get to that in a little bit. What I want to do now is I want to tell you about another very important concept, which is what I call the voice. The voice is primarily what makes concepts happen in your mind. What is the voice? The voice is the internal talk and languaging that's happening all the time throughout your day. Right now, as you're sitting there watching this video, you're talking to yourself. You're having opinions, you're agreeing with me, you're disagreeing with me, you have certain beliefs that come up, certain objections, comments, criticisms, opinions, whatever. And it's literally like a little voice inside your head saying stuff like, oh, that's a great point. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, I've never thought about this. Oh, no, Leo, you're wrong. And so the voice talks and talks and talks and talks. And there are two aspects to the voice. One is the words, the way it sounds, and two is images. So what we're talking about here is thoughts. The voice is responsible for your thoughts. The voice is basically your thoughts. And thoughts come in two flavors, words and images. Images are, think about the orange right now. You've got an image of the orange. That's a thought. Say the word orange in your mind right now. That's also a thought of the orange. So there's two different ways in which you can create a thought and access it. And a lot of times they're both operating at the same time. You might be imagining and thinking about it at the same time. This is what allows concepts to happen, is the voice comes in there and creates them. Now, it's interesting that you've never sat down and really looked at what the voice actually is. You might have some opinions about what the voice is and why it's there and who's talking, but have you actually sat down and looked very deeply, very objectively at what the voice actually is? Who's creating the voice and who's listening to the voice is the pertinent question. See, the way it works is that your voice talks all the time. It talks and talks and talks and talks and talks, and it creates a web of concepts, which it then calls reality. And it also creates a self-image. The self-image is the image of yourself and ideas about who you think you are and how you behave. So any notions that you have right now about your nature, your true nature, those are all part of your self-image. And this self-image is created by voice. Now the question is, can we break out of this self-image? If the self-image is all concepts, then what is the actual self when you get rid of the concepts and get rid of the self-image? What's the real self, not the image of the self? Now you might say, well, Leo, we can't get rid of concepts. In fact, concepts are good. We don't want to get rid of concepts. Well, keep your mind open. What if concepts are actually a smokescreen that prevent you from seeing something very, very, very real, which is the noumenal you? And now comes the crux of the matter. When you say that you're the body, and when you say that you're the mind, and when you say that you're your thoughts, or the one perceiving your thoughts, what actually is that? Is that a physical fact, a physical reality, or is that a conceptual reality? The identification you have with your body, and I'm not being literal, I'm being very serious and very, I'm not being figurative, I'm being very literal here. So when I say identification with your body, that means that when I cut you with a knife, you recoil and you experience pain and emotional distress. Why is that? Because you believe that I'm actually injuring you. I'm not just injuring a body, I'm injuring your body, I'm injuring you. When I tell you a mean, nasty comment, like you're stupid and ugly and smelly, and you're never going to get a good relationship, then you take that personally because you identify with being a certain way. You have a certain self-image. You want to be handsome and attractive and sexy and certain other qualities. So you are threatened. Now the question is, what is being threatened? Could it actually be the case that the identification that you have with your body is conceptually constructed by the voice, and that as the voice constructs it, you believe it automatically? You never question the voice. And so you identify with your body. Now you say, well, Leo, but I actually am my body. You're telling me I'm not my body, but this sounds like a far-fetched theory, a philosophy of some kind. I am the body. Look, I'm the body. It's real. It's a fact. What, are you stupid? Who's saying that? Is the voice saying this? Is the voice telling you that you are your body? That you really think that you're the body? That you're factually the body? Is that real, or is that the voice constructing stories? Now you might say, well, Leo, but the voice, why is the voice false? Why is not the voice true? You're telling me that my voice is false. What if my voice is true? Maybe. But consider that the voice can come up with a lot of different concepts that are not factually true. For example, think about Santa Claus. Santa Claus is a construct of the voice. Is Santa Claus real? No. Think about a horse with two heads on it. Got that image? Is that real? Or is that just a story in your mind? Think about yourself right now sipping on a pina colada, sitting on a tropical island, enjoying the warm sun. You've got that image? What is that? Is that a concept or is that reality? Are you actually sitting on a beach? Or is that just a figment of your imagination? Now, those seem like simple cases of imagination. But now the question is, what about you yourself? What about your identification with your body? Could it be that your identification with your body and your self-image, that these are just as fictional as you imagining right now that you're sitting on a tropical beach sipping a pina colada? And don't be so quick to say no, because actually it turns out that it is exactly this. And when you start to appreciate and understand this, whoa, you get this whoa moment, like, oh, well, if that's the case, then what could be outside of the voice? What could be outside the self-image? What could I actually be if, in fact, let's just consider as a hypothetical that the voice could be wrong and the voice could just be imagining things? And that is the mother of all questions. That is the deepest question that you can ask yourself in your life. That is the deepest question to which you can find an answer in life, is to ask yourself, what am I outside of the voice? And the answer turns out to be very, very profound and not at all what you expect. I want to go talk a little bit more about the voice, get you a little better understanding of the voice, because this is so critical to starting to do this work. You might wonder, well, Leo, how does the voice actually construct the self? If you're saying that my sense of self is constructed by the voice, how does this actually happen? And it's actually a very, very simple process. And I want to imitate to you right now how the self is constructed in your own mind. I'm going to do a literal imitation. I'm going to be talking, but this talking, think of it as the voice inside your head talking. This is how it talks. It says something like this. I'm over here. This is me. I'm Leo. I'm speaking right now. I'm having thoughts. I'm thinking. Look at this. Oh, look, I'm thinking. I'm thinking. Leo, me, yes. Me. I. Here I am. I think, therefore I am. Could this not actually be me? But look, it's me. How could it not be me? I'm really me. You can't deny that this is me. I'm thinking, who's thinking this stuff? I am. This is me. I'm Leo. I'm hungry. I want a better job. I want more money. I have these goals. I'm afraid of that thing. I'm afraid of this thing. I get angry for this reason. I get angry for that reason. Right now, I'm feeling happy. Right now, I'm feeling sad. Right now, I'm feeling angry. Damn it, why did that guy tell me that? Damn it, why can't she just do what I want her to do? And on and on and on it goes, like that. So your whole existence, if you start paying attention to it very carefully, is this. It's a voice in your head talking, image, image. And certain talk and images have the label I in it. And this label I, it's just accepted by you as being you. What if it wasn't? What if it was an arbitrary label? What if it was a confusion of the mind? If we got rid of all that stuff somehow, and all that was left was the real you, what would that real you be? That's the question. Also notice that not only do you speak to yourself, but you have images of yourself. So right now, as you sit there, you might say, well, Leo, okay, sure. I mean, the voice, it talks, and yes, we label stuff, and this is somewhat, a human activity that we do. We're labeling reality. But I mean, still, if I get rid of all that, I'm still the body, right? You're saying I'm not the body? But I mean, I feel like I'm the body. I can feel the body. I can see the body. Here I am. But who's telling you that the things that are being felt and being seen are you? After all, you're also seeing other objects. You're seeing people. You're seeing me. You're seeing a table. You're seeing a car. You're seeing a tree. You're seeing the sun. But you don't identify with those. The question is, why not? You're seeing them. Why aren't you identifying with them? You're seeing them just like you're seeing the body. Now you might say, well, Leo, I don't feel a car. I don't feel the tree inside of a tree. I only feel inside myself. But what if the things that are being felt inside yourself aren't actually yourself? They're just being felt in the same way that a tree is being seen, and the car is being seen, and a bird squawking is being heard. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever opened your mind to that possibility seriously? What you're going to discover is that you have an image of who you are. You have a literal self-image in your mind, a picture. So right now you're sitting there, and when I tell you about you and I point at you, you might get a flash of you sitting there as though there was a camera behind the body, your head, and looking down at you, like from a third person. In fact, you might have an image right now of the back of your head, because you don't see the back of your head, but you have an image of it. So think of the back of your head right now. Now the question is, that thing you're thinking about, is that reality or is that a concept? The back of your head, is that a real entity or is that a story in your mind right now? Look right now, right in the moment. Don't come up with another theory. Don't come up with another story, because you just get sucked into more stories. Instead, actually look at what is the back of your head. What is it metaphysically speaking? What is it existentially? You can actually sit and look and ask yourself, okay, so what is the back of my head? What is that? Oh, that's an image. And it's a word, back of my head. It's a thought. Now, if you go and you run to the mirror and take a look in the mirror at the back of your head, now it becomes real. But until then, it's a thought. What if the thing that you think you are was the same way? It was just a thought. So the voice likes to say, I am the body, I am thoughts, I am the voice. The voice likes to say, I am the one that's perceiving life. I'm over here, everything else is over there, I'm looking at those things. I'm also in control of my body, and I'm in control of my mouth, and I'm in control of my thoughts. And the voice very sneakily says the following too. All of the above is obvious. It's obviously this way. It can't be any other way. Obvious, right? Not quite so fast. Why don't we stop and detain the voice and ask it a couple of questions? Why are we trusting the voice so blindly? Who's telling you that you can trust the voice? Is it the voice? Are you listening to the voice telling you that you should trust the voice? And who's actually listening to the voice? Is the voice listening to itself, or is there an entity listening to the voice? And what is the voice really if we break it down and we ask ourselves, existentially, what is the voice constructed out of? And what if the voice is wrong? What if the things the voice says are arbitrary and aren't actually connected and welded to reality in the way that we think? What if what the voice does is just label stuff? What if the voice is like a label maker, creating label after label after label, including the label that all labels are true and that all labels are real? That's the tricky ultimate label. And it creates the I label. And it also creates the I is real label. And then it creates the I is really, 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 really real label. And then it says the I is actually true. And then it says everything above is true. And it's like a label machine that keeps spitting out label after label after label, but it cleverly nests one label in another label. And it kind of interconnects them in a way where the labels start to take on a life of their own. And what that creates is the sense of you, the sense of self, all these labels. And it's a giant smokescreen. And this is a smokescreen that you've never really sat down and seriously questioned and looked into to find, where does the ultimate truth of this lead? If I get rid of all the labels, where does it ultimately go? Isn't it ingenious how your voice operates? Isn't it ingenious how it's constructed that it believes itself? It's kind of like the ultimate spin doctor believing his own bullshit. That's what your self is like. That's what your false self is. When you can get rid of all that, you can ask yourself the question, then what is the real self? And that's a very, very deep thing. And notice that if you get rid of the labels, then how can you even speak of the real self? You can't speak of it through the voice, because then it just emboldens the voice and it creates more labels. So it would have to be a totally different way of accessing the real self rather than through labeling, the mechanism that you're used to. The mechanism of labeling, this is how the sciences work. A lot of the sciences, the theoretical parts of science work this way. This is how religions work. This is how philosophy works. This is how ordinary everyday thinking works. So pretty much 99.9% of our lives are labelized. And we don't really have much experience with how to access reality without labels. And because of this, we assume that the only way is through labels and that the best we can do is through labels. But what if there was another way? You just weren't really proficient with it yet. And it would take you some learning and some experience to develop this new sixth sense, you might say. Wouldn't that be interesting? Well, in fact, that is the case. And you can develop something called mindfulness or awareness or consciousness. And through an expansion of your consciousness, you can see more and more of the truth. And ultimately, it's not even a seeing of it, it turns into a being of it, which is a really interesting possibility. Let's go back to this model of conceptualization, right? We said there's the things in themselves, there's the perceptions, and then there's the concepts. Well, you might say, okay, Leo, I know how to get rid of the concepts. Let's say I silence my voice. Then I get to perceptions. I can just perceive the world without thinking or talking about it or imagining things about it, and therefore I have perceptions. But then how do I get to the actual thing from perceptions? How do I go from perceptions to the thing itself? Is that possible? How can that be possible? It seems ridiculous. Well, remember when we were talking about the inner and outer world? Who told you that there's an inner and outer world? Is that a perception? Is that the thing in itself, or is that another concept? What if the inner and outer world distinction was a concept? And we could break that concept. What would we have? Interestingly, what we would have is we would have a merging of perceptions and the things in themselves. They would merge into one. This disappears, this and this merge into one and become reality itself. And then where are you in this whole paradigm? Well, the you that you think you were, the concepts, this can also be dissolved. So when you are dissolved and the inner-outer distinction is dissolved, what happens? These two things merge, you merge with them, and the thing is one. And now, this is the brilliance of this, the beauty of it, is that you don't perceive the truth anymore. You are it. You are the truth. You are physically it. And it is one thing. It's not partitioned into I'm here, he's over there, she's over there. It's one. Deep, 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 deep. This goes very, very deep. The problem, though, is going to be pretty difficult for you to dissolve your notions of the inner-outer distinction, and it's going to be very, very difficult for you to dissolve your notions of you yourself, because you like to think of yourself as a distinct entity from everything else. Well, this is not true, but even when you say to yourself, okay, let me see this, Leo, I want to see it. I want to go along with you. How can I actually see it? Well, the problem is that you've been living for 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years of your life in this mass delusion. You've constructed your entire life is a lie constructed around yourself. So if what you really want is you want to get this merger of perception and being, and you want to be the thing itself, and you want to see the truth itself, you want to be the truth itself, if you want that, then what you have to do is you have to undertake a very serious, deep, systematic dissolution of yourself and your life. And this is not something that most people are willing to do. Because the voice will come up with 1,000 really good excuses and reasons for why you shouldn't do this. And because you know nothing but to believe your voice, you're going to believe everything it says. So the voice will lie to itself and believe itself and keep itself stuck. And this is the condition of 99.9999999% of the human race. They're stuck in this delusion. You might wonder, well, Leo, what about the inner-outer world distinction? And you're telling me, how can we get rid of this inner-outer world distinction? Doesn't there have to be somebody that's perceiving the thing? So, for example, look, we've got this orange, right? So we've got the orange. I'm seeing the orange. Someone has to see the orange, right? What are you telling me? When you say inner and outer merge, you're telling me that the orange exists and there's no one seeing the orange? Where am I in this whole thing? And that's a very good question, is where are you in this whole thing? What if there was no you in this whole thing? Would you be willing to accept that? What if after doing this deep, deep, deep investigation, you discover that, oh shit, I'm not a part of this thing at all. I'm not a part of reality. Could that be a realization you could have? Could you stomach that? Well, you're going to have to, because that ends up being the truth. But it's very interesting that we assume part of what the voice says is the voice says, if there's a perception, there has to be a perceiver. And if I'm seeing this orange, already look, the assumption is there. I'm seeing this orange. It's not possible for there to be an orange and the orange to be seen without a seer. But have you really questioned that? In fact, if you sit down and question it, you'll discover that the perceiver-perception distinction is not possible. It makes no sense if you really dig deep. Why does it not make sense? Well, think about it like this. All right, like you've got the orange, right? So you're saying, okay, I have to be here to see the orange. So if you're seeing the orange, my question for you is, who is seeing you? Are you seeing yourself? Or is there another entity that sees you? Because your claim is that, well, Leo, you can't just have an orange that sees itself. That's ridiculous. So someone has to see it. So if someone has to see it, then who's seeing that something? Does that someone who's seeing the something, does the someone see itself? If the someone sees itself, then there exist in reality things that can see themselves. So basically, what you're claiming is not any different fundamentally from what I'm claiming. If I claim that the orange sees itself, and you claim that, no, the orange is seen by me, but then I see myself, basically what you're doing is you're taking it one step back, but in the end, you still are seeing yourself, which is kind of weird. How can anything see itself? I don't know. We only have this one reality. Can things see themselves in reality, or can't they? What do we have to compare with? It might sound like ridiculous. Well, nothing can see itself. But then how are you seeing yourself? You might say, well, Leo, no, there's someone inside me that's seeing me. But then who's seeing that someone? Trace it all the way back. Trace it back, not in your theories, but in actual reality. Trace it back and see who's actually seeing you. What you're going to discover is that there's not anyone seeing you because there's not a you. The only thing that there is just external reality, you might say. And so you are like it. You are part of it. You are being it, and it is being you. And these two things merge, like we were saying. So perceivers are not possible if you really think about that model of perceivers and perceptions. It's not possible. What you've got is you've just got a world of perceptions. Now you might ask, well, where do perceptions come from? How can this be? Well, look, this goes back to the question of what is reality? And how do you know how reality should be? See, people get very confused by this. They make this very big mistake by saying, well, but this is ridiculous. This is outrageous. Reality can't be this way. But if you think about it, reality, look around reality. Reality is like magic. It's not any different than magic. The fact that things exist is miraculous. We don't even know why does existence exist? We don't know. What actually is existence? We don't know. Have we compared our existence to 100 other existences to see if it's a crazy existence or a normal existence? No, there's only one existence that we know of. So this being the case, what do our intuitions about existence tell us? Do they tell us much? Do they really mean much? They don't mean much. In the same way that the intuition of an ant doesn't really say much about physics or reality or nature or anything else. The ant has a very limited brain, which is capable of very limited understanding in a very limited context because it evolved for that particular purpose. Now, the human being is a little bit better, but not much better. And we very often forget this fact. Our brain can understand stuff, but our intuition is shaped by very basic human everyday needs. Our brain evolved to take care of hunger, sex, shelter, food and drinking, and socialization. That's basically all that our brain evolved to do. And any kind of scientific understandings we have, that's a little bonus that we get. But let's not be so conceited and myopic as to assume that just because we know how to gather food and wage a war and have some sex and do some clever socialization, that now all of a sudden we can intuitively grasp the nature of existence itself. It's preposterous to assume this. If existence was one way versus another way, would either way be more crazy than the other? Isn't the current way existence is already crazy enough? I mean, things exist. Why would they exist in the first place? It's already crazy. If you take a look at nature, if you take a look at astronomy, cosmology, it starts to blow your mind at how intricate and complex and also counterintuitive the universe is. In fact, the history of science and philosophy and mathematics has just been a repeat again and again and again of human beings learning something, thinking that it should be this way, and then that getting all overthrown and us discovering, oh, wait a minute, our intuitions were all wrong about this thing. So the most basic example of this is we believed intuitively, we think that we live on a flat planet. But actually we discovered that we live on a round planet. Intuitively, we believe that the sun orbits around the Earth, and that the Earth is at the center of the solar system and all the stars. But then we discover that actually no, we're just this little ball spinning around a giant sun, and this sun is part of a cluster of stars, and this cluster of stars is part of a giant galaxy called the Milky Way, and that is part of many other galaxies and many other star systems, and there's literally billions of stars in the Milky Way, and then billions of Milky Way-like galaxies throughout the whole universe. And this is just the stuff that we can see through our telescopes and some of our radio equipment and stuff, and our satellites. This is not to even say what could possibly be outside of the Big Bang, if anything, or in some other dimension or whatever. And if we go into the smaller end of scale of physics, then we take a look at subatomic particles, and then quarks and leptons, and all the interesting stuff that goes on there, particle physics. And then we take a look deeper, and we start to get into string theory and quantum mechanics. And there, scientists have discovered that our intuitions completely fly out the window. Even logic itself doesn't apply to certain situations within quantum mechanics. So who are we to say how reality has to be constructed? Is there a reasonable, logical way for reality to be, and then some sort of crazy, illogical way? Actually, if you think about it, it makes no sense, because there's only one reality, and everything else is couched within the reality. So there's nobody to say how reality should or shouldn't be. And the point of all this is just to say, don't be so certain about what you believe about reality and what you believe is plausible versus implausible, because your notions of plausibility are heavily swayed by your very limited human intuition. And then the question becomes, what is reality and what is you? And what's very exciting to me about these questions is that these questions can be answered empirically, not just philosophically. I spent 6 years of my life doing very hardcore philosophy when I was in college. And I got disenchanted with it because it turned into this big circle jerk. Everyone doing this big circle jerk in philosophy. It's really quite disgusting. And then I turned my back on philosophy for many, many years. But then when I heard this idea that it's actually possible for the inner and outer world to merge, and for the perceptions and the truth to be one, for phenomena and noumena to become one, when that's really possible as a possibility, then it's like, oh, then there might be a way to do what I wanted to do with philosophy in reality. And that to me is the most profound discovery that I've made in my personal development journey, is that this might be possible, and it's worth pursuing a little bit further. And it's worth asking yourself, what am I? Who am I really? All right, this is Leo. I'm signing off. Post me your comments down below. Click the like button, like this video. Share it with a friend if you would, please. And finally, come sign up to my newsletter at Actualized.org right here. It's a free newsletter. I release new videos on self-actualization topics, usually. But we're also going to be covering more deep spiritual enlightenment topics. And I've got a lot more videos coming on how to now start to do the investigation, the empirical investigation. Here in this video, we laid the groundwork. Next, we're going to start to move into actually doing some exercises, laying some more groundwork, going even deeper. So it's all really exciting and cool. And you're going to actually be able to sit down and start doing this stuff for yourself, not just having to sit here and listen to me philosophize about it, which really is not the proper way to do it. But we have to start somewhere. So this is the foundation that we start with. And why do we want to do all this? Well, because it turns out that all your psychological problems, every block that you have in your life, I don't care if it's in business, in relationships, with money, with finding your passion in life, with depression, with anger problems, literally anything. Anything that triggers you emotionally. All of this stems from your false self. Because you believe in this voice that keeps telling you that yourself is real, you have all these problems. If you get rid of this voice, not only do you get some sort of insight into the nature of reality, but you get a release from your own mental cage, your own mental prison that you live in. And all your drama, all the petty bullshit of your life will go away. Which is another cool thing about this, is that we're not just doing philosophy, but we're doing very practical personal development as we do this. To me, this is so profound and so exciting. The possibilities of this are incredible. You could not imagine in your wildest dreams that something like this is possible. So for there to even be a chance that this is possible, to me, it's worth pursuing. And so that's what I'm doing in my own life. And I encourage you to follow along with me on this journey, discover it for yourself. And one day you may have this enlightenment and this release from your own mental prison. All right, go ahead, sign up for all that.